All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this week's Spiritual View. I am here with my beautiful co-host, Kim Wilkinson, and Sheila I don't know, is Sheila working or is she just playing hooky today? Do you know?
She is somewhere. I forget where she is.
Me too. Okay.
Yeah, she might be at a conference or something.
I can't seem to remember anything these days. So don't be offended, Sheila, if you happen to watch this episode. Oh, beautiful. So Kim and I thought we would hop on today and we would actually talk a little bit about spiritual entrepreneurship and what that might look like. And so I feel like some of you who are listeners who are thinking about entrepreneurship, you're going to hear a lot of things that might be where you're at now in your journey. And those of you that are already in entrepreneurship, just like Kim and I, you're probably going to resonate with some of the stories. You might even be having some of this occurring in your own business right now. So it's a huge topic, I think. So maybe let's start. Kim, why don't you share a little bit about your timeline of how you became an entrepreneur and what that looked like?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess I would say to full-time entrepreneurship, that goes back about 10 or 11, maybe 12 years ago now. And that was when I decided to become a full-time yoga teacher. And honestly, it was the best thing I ever did. Becoming a yoga teacher opened the doors to everything else that I did. But I know one thing that is a challenge, and I think every entrepreneur can relate to this, and I'm sure you can too, is that whole concept of imposter syndrome. Especially when we're teaching or coaching or providing a service. Right. I think we compare so much. And, as I mentioned, I started with teaching yoga. And I guess for me, it was a little bit easy in the sense that for a lot of years before that part-time, I taught things like boot camps and spin classes. And way back, I taught swimming lessons. So I've always been a teacher of some sort since probably 15, 16. But so that did give me a bit of confidence when I went into teaching yoga. But I'm sure I can remember comparing myself to other teachers and thinking I'm not good enough, or there's such a better teacher. And I did that for a lot of years. And it probably still slips back into my mind at times, into my awareness. From there, I got into Reiki and other coaching, and I have so many modalities. I'm not going to go into them, but each time I went into something new, I definitely did feel that sense of, oh, I'm not as good as this person, or I don't have as much experience as that person. And yet, I'm also the first one to say, when I'm teaching, or even back in my old life when I worked in municipal government and would hire and train staff, to me, credentials wasn't necessarily the most important thing. Just because you have a piece of paper doesn't mean you're really good at what you've been trained to do. And that's in any case, whether you're a carpenter, a doctor, a yoga teacher, whatever it is. That's just something I've always looked at. But I can say it took me a long time to get over that sense of not being good enough, or not being even as equal as anybody else, and to stop comparing myself. I don't know. Is that something you experienced as well?
Yeah, it was funny, like looking back on my journey. And I think if you've, for the listeners, if you've watched the previous episodes, then you know this, or you know me, then you know this piece about me, which is that I was a teacher for 15 years. And interesting, like I would have never told you that I was going to run my own business, own my own business, be an entrepreneur. Like that would have never been in my wheelhouse back then. Like, I came from a family where, you go, you get an education, or you get, some kind of ticket, whatever that is. Right. And then you get the 9-to-5 and you make sure you got a pension, you make sure you got benefits, and then you're set for life kind of thing. And, if we get into the realm of, oh, well, I don't really like what I do anymore. It's like, oh, well, nobody likes what they do. Like there was totally a lack of a, kind of sense of purpose. And it was more along the lines of we do what we need to do in order to survive and to provide for our family and whatever. And we work hard so that we can have, a little bit of time to play kind of thing. Right. So even when I started, like if I look back now, I can recognize like even in my teenage years, I always had more than one job. Like the aspect of being multi-passionate was always there for me. I was always doing all of these different things and didn't really, I thought I needed the money, or I thought, whatever that was. Right. But when I got into teaching, and I too used the gateway of yoga, that was my very first one. And I feel like, top 3 gateways for most people who are going to become spiritual entrepreneurs: yoga, meditation, Reiki. Right. Those are the 3 doors, or excuse me, one of the doors you'll use to walk through. And then who knows what happened. Like I could have never guessed that walking through those, I have all those 3. And who would have ever guessed that using those 3 doors would have brought me to, now I do Akashic records and past life work. And at the time I didn't even know what that was. Right. Like you never know. Right. But I remember earlier, like in my yogic journey, I totally had a lot. And truthfully, I actually had imposter throughout a lot of it. I don't necessarily have it so much anymore, and it can creep in. But even when I started doing the Akashic records and the SRT, I had that. And there was always this, it took me a long time to really recognize and to understand and unplug from the hierarchy, right? Where it was always the comparison of looking at the person that trained me, or the person that was the teacher, or the person that introduced me to it, and being like, oh, well, they do it so much better. So why would anyone want to come and see me? Right. Or why would they pay me when they can pay that person over there who's already been doing it for X amount of years and has so much more expertise and is way better at it. Right. So that's something I've gone through a lot in my life that I feel like creeps up for everyone. And the one piece that I often say to my clients is entrepreneurship, or whatever other word you want to call it, solopreneurship or business ownership, whatever label you put on that. That is like a fucking fast track to your healing. Like if you choose that path, all of your own personal shit is going to come up in your business. At least that's been my experience. Has that been yours as well?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting, right? Because it's how we show up in one area of our life is how we show up in other areas of our life, right? So even a really tangible example of that is, when I decided to start the online portion of my business, which would have been, when the world shut down, essentially is when I started to look at it. I was fucking terrified. I was terrified to show up on social media. I was terrified that people were going to be like, who do you think you are? You don't know what you're talking about. You're making it all up. You're a fraud. You're a farce. Like all of those things. I was terrified of getting attacked on social media from the aspect of my abilities, but I was also terrified of getting attacked on social media for who I was, and all of my personal stuff, like my relationship with my body, my relationship with how I looked and how I dressed and how I would speak, and all of those things also came up to the forefront because I was like, oh my God, like one of the stories I always told myself was, when I'm 20 pounds lighter, then I can show up live. That was a big one for me. And my body has been a lifelong thing for me. And it just reared its ugly head right again there as well. Did you have anything like that?
Not in that sense, but I definitely found, working in all the different modalities too, like you said, in mirrors for us,
Mm-hmm.
even the type of clients that we attract.
Yeah.
We tend to attract, people who are going through what we're going through or what we've gone through. And I think that's fantastic. It's scary as heck when it happens because you're like, oh, right. Yeah. But like you said, it's the chance to clear our own shit and transform. Right. And then we move from those old beliefs of not being good enough and, not being capable.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me, one of the biggest thing that I learned through all of this is that the most important thing in whatever I do, whatever modality I'm working in or any area of life is being authentic. Mm-hmm. Right. And I know you and I are on the same page with this as far as we've taken a lot of trainings, and we're always told you have to do it this way. You can't combine this with that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, for a lot of time before COVID, we were taught in so many modalities, you cannot do this online.
Yep.
Right. And I remember the year before COVID, I was getting this nudge, this intuitive guidance to start doing the Reiki trainings online. And at first, when that message came through, I was like, I can't do that, right? I'm not allowed to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But okay, who made that rule and why? And why does it even have to be a rule?
Yeah.
And I eventually got over that. And I think how I got over it was, I thought, okay, we teach distance Reiki. So why can't we teach distance training?
Yeah.
And so I decided to do it. And I was nervous because I thought, what if this doesn't work? What if it doesn't work? But honestly, we went through it, and the feedback I got was amazing. And my understanding from their feedback was that it was just as powerful and educational as an in-person training.
Yeah.
And then I started to run a few more after that. And then, of course, COVID came. And then, we can do everything online now.
Yeah.
Including visiting your doctor, right? I mean, some things you obviously still have to go into the doctor for, but there's so many rules. And I mean, gosh, we could have a whole episode talking about rules. And, sometimes it's good to have rules and boundaries, but you know what? Sometimes they can be expanded.
Yeah, like it definitely depends where they come from. Like for me, when I started to kind of blend my stuff together too, because I had the same thing. I was like, okay, well, you either have to come for Reiki, or you have to come for this, or you have to come for that. And then I was like, those of you that work in the spiritual realm will understand this. You can't just turn shit off. It doesn't work that way. Once you're attuned to Reiki, the Reiki comes whether I'm massaging or doing a Reiki session or whatever that is, right? When you are connected to past lives, they fucking show up in the darndest of places. Like you can't shut it off. So the ask to start to constrict that or restrict that can actually become, I don't know about you, but for me, super uncomfortable. And I also recognized it would become super uncomfortable for me in my body. Like I would start to have physical, let's call them symptoms, I guess, or signs, because I wasn't allowing the flow. I was trying to turn shit off. Right. And as a practitioner, that can be a super uncomfortable, in my opinion, place to have to constantly turn it off, right? Or only use this then and this then, because it's not meant to operate that way, right? It's meant to be alchemized and weaved through you, through me. And that's what makes you different than me and me different than the other person and all of that, right? And so when I really started to want to shift and change that and tapped into what came forward was, a lot of we could call it the structure. Like we have taken ancient practices and created structure because people want to understand, right? We want to use the logical mind around that. And I think it almost kind of maybe blew up in a way from the place of, we often don't look at the fact that, and I don't know what it is about, this is my personal opinion, obviously, but the spiritual community missing the aspect of it's still a business. Right? It's still a business. So why would we create some kind of rule like that? Well, because someone's trying to create a business. They're creating a business on in person, or they're creating a business on their modality. So they're trying to structure it in a way to create value for what it is that they're offering, which in effect, and it might not necessarily be consciously, but they're devaluing the other things. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah. You just reminded me of a story actually. And I know I think we're going to get into talking about social media and how we respond and that sort of thing. And maybe I'll just back up to that for a minute. Because I mean, when you put yourself out there on social media, I mean, that's a huge audience, right? It's the world.
Mm-hmm.
And no matter what, there's going to be people that support you, and there's going to be people that bash the shit out of you. Right. And we've all been there. We've all had that person comment or laugh at our post or tell us we're a fake and we're a fraud and whatever. And I know it used to create so much instant anxiety in me. Like I would physically feel it. I would feel this need to defend, and I would get into these back and forth comment battles to try and change this person's mind, which I know now you're never going to change that person's mind. Not in that day.
Yeah.
Not in that day. I mean, eventually over time, I got to where I would just respond by, thank you for sharing your opinion. Have a great day. For the most part now, I just don't even respond. And now I rarely even get triggered. But I had a comment about a week ago, and it was just one of those ones where I just had to respond. And I try to do so from a loving place rather than a defensive place. But it was interesting. And I can't even remember what post it was, something with the spiritual stuff, because the comment that this person had made was, I think they did mention like something about being a fraud and how can you charge for spirituality? God is free, and on and on and on. And I just replied, I said, I can't remember everything I said, but one of the things I said was, the last time I went to church, they were still collecting money every Sunday. So how is that any different?
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, like you said it earlier, I think a lot of people too get into this type of work and they don't want to charge. Or the other thing is people expect this stuff should be free, right? Yeah. I don't know about you, but I've invested a lot of time and a lot of money, tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, more than my VED.
Yeah. And everything is energy, and money is just energy too. Right. And there's got to be exchange.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's often where a lot of entrepreneurs get stuck, right? Is the whole money piece, right? Is they don't want to charge too much, or they don't want people, there's that whole song and dance that we could go into. Like, I remember even having money issues when I was opening my brick and mortar, being like, I'm not trained in a business. I don't know anything about that type of thing. And that held me back for a long time, but what's fascinating, if we go back to the social media thing, I've actually had a very different experience than you. I have never had anyone attack me on my social media. Maybe I'm not big enough. I don't know. Maybe I haven't got there yet, but I haven't had that experience. And it was one of my greatest fears, was I thought that people were going to start to kind of like, quote unquote, call me out. Right. And I was terrified of the humiliation that I thought I would feel. And I had created this whole story around it, right? That's the power of our human nature, right? I created this big story about it. And then it was like, I got onto social media, and I mean, I've been doing it for years now. Nothing has ever happened. And good. Well, it is good, but I also think, like, for me, and that's not to say it won't ever, but like, let's just try and create that it will. But part of it for me was kind of like, it brought forward this really interesting element. What would I call it? Like maybe self-importance in a way, from the perspective of like, I really had to realize, like, it was like, I created the story that everybody would be watching. And it was actually like, you know what, Tracy, no one actually gives a shit. Do you know what I mean? And especially when you're starting in your business, right? Like, as you kind of progress, then people do start to follow you because they resonate with what you say, but they're following you because they resonate, not because they want to create this, right? And it doesn't mean that they will always agree. But I also think that we can set the intention and use our energy to attract who we want into our field. And when I have had instances, not necessarily on social media, but perhaps in a different way, shape, or form, where someone has, said, oh, I don't like this, or, oh, I don't agree with this. Often for me, it's actually been a lesson about setting my own boundaries. Like, so in my social media posts, and I think I've only done this, I think maybe 3 times. But I've had, my experience tends to be like men creeping my shit. And then like putting comments about like, oh, can you friend me? Or, like this kind of crap. And I don't even work with men. So it's funny, but I'm just like, delete. Like, it's my social media. So I have a right to actually not allow you to comment on my post if I would like to, right? So I think there's also an element of remembering that you also have the power to control what happens on your feed or on your
Yeah.
social media.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I get friend requests like that, like especially if it's an account that's just been created, there's no posts, I don't accept it. I actually, I would say most of my any negative comments come from like ads, like I'll run ads. So it's random people.
Yeah.
But I will usually leave it, like before I would have deleted them.
Mhm.
Most of the time now I just leave them.
Yeah.
It just does not bother me anymore. And I think, you know, when I think we talked about this on another show, you know, law of attraction, right? The energy you're in, the beliefs you have, that's the people you attract and you're following, that sort of thing. And mine has definitely, like, I don't see as much negativity, Facebook, Instagram anymore.
Yeah.
Unless I run an ad here and there, I might get one. Probably that one that I shared from a week or two ago is probably the first one on Facebook in a couple of years. TikTok, my TikTok just went nuts this year. And it's interesting to see the comments on there. And this is where I really realized that, okay, I am done with this and I am 100% being my authentic self because I don't even get that little poke anymore. So let's talk about my hair. So I've had my blue hair for over a year now. And I don't even know why it started, but I have gotten so many comments from men, women, children, all ages, seniors in the grocery store that they like my hair. And I thought, okay, well, this is all a good sign. And honestly, it's become the greatest marketing tool for my business because everybody remembers the lady with the blue hair. Not until this last month have I experienced any negative comments. And it's interesting because they're all on TikTok, the ones that are there. I have a couple of posts and I can't remember which video it was, and I haven't really read through all the comments because I just don't give them my energy anymore. But there was a few comments about, you know, why the blue hair, I can't trust what someone with blue hair says or whatever. And I just, you know, when I saw it, I kind of laughed. But what was interesting is all these other people that I don't even know that were following were jumping in and you're rude and, you know, how can you say this? And like these battles back and forth that I'm not even engaged in and to watch this. And so what I learned from that one, and I don't want to say I don't give a shit. It's just this acceptance of myself and acceptance of what others think. And if they don't like it, it doesn't matter. And I don't need to, you know, justify. But it was interesting too, to see the others who I don't know jump in and get into these heated battles. And for me, I just recognize it now as just a complete waste of time and energy.
Yes.
That's what it is. It's a complete waste of time and energy. One, I don't need to change the person's mind. I don't need to explain. And I don't need them to even be a follower, a client, or a friend.
Yeah.
It's their choice. And whatever they choose is 100% fine by me.
Totally.
And so it's a good feeling to finally not be bothered by anything like that.
Yeah.
At all.
It's like, you know, if I were to sit down and write like 12 rules for the beginning entrepreneurs like that, like there's my top two. Like the first one is to remember that no matter what business you're in, right? Because you don't have to be doing spiritual stuff, but no matter what business you're in, we're never in the business of convincing, right? Because that is not the energy that we want to come from. It's not the energy that's going to create what we want to create in our business, which ultimately is abundance in all way, shape, and form, and, you know, community, all of those things, right? It's not my job to convince you of what I'm sharing, right? If it doesn't resonate with you, then, you know, totally cool, respect that, and go find someone else that it does resonate from, right? And the second piece about being, you know, authenticity, and this is always fascinating to me because I don't know about you, but I've taken a lot of business online training over the years, right? In terms of marketing. So they talk about strategy, they talk about, you know, all the funnels you're supposed to do and all of this stuff that I don't do, by the way, but all of that kind of stuff. And what's been dropped into my field, probably actually last week, it came in through again. And this is maybe the third time it's come through, 3 different people, none of them knowing each other. And one of the pieces of feedback that I've gotten was that my social media specifically is too, and they all use the same word, which is fascinating, is too curated, was the feedback I got. You're too curated. You need to be more like just raw and real and, not all the fancy photos. And I was like, the first time I heard that, I was like, oh my God. And it took me a minute to check myself before I wreck myself or whatever. Right. And the last time I heard it, I didn't get a trigger at all. But what we have to remember, no matter who we're getting feedback from and whatever is, number one, where's your authenticity in what you're putting forward into the world? Right. Like, so first of all, all 3 people that said that to me, none of them do branding. None of them do photos. None of them do that. And that's totally cool. But I actually like to do that. Like, I don't do it because I think I have to, or because I think it's the only way I'm going to be successful. I do it actually because I love to do it. I love having beautiful photos. It's just something that I really enjoy, and it's a creative outlet for me. And some of you would know this, like if you come to my home, you would see that my home is curated too, because it's actually a part of who I am. Right. So like, everything kind of, not like OCD, everything has its place, right? But my home is curated. One of the comments I've gotten before is like, your home kind of looks like a magazine a little bit. It kind of does, because that's just a part of who I am. And that's kind of the aesthetic, I guess you could say, that I like. But for someone who isn't that, right, then it gets turned into a place of, well, you're too curated, you need to do this. And so often when we're getting feedback from people about our businesses, we also have to remember, or to look at, where's the lensing coming from? Right? You're not going to get a business coach sitting in front of you who's going to help you, that's going to say, you need to do funnels, unless they probably do funnels. Right? And likely you're going to get one that says, well, you actually don't need to do funnels because they don't fucking do funnels. Right? Like, so it's all, there's projection in all of it as you move through your business. And so I feel like one of the most important aspects is that aspect of authenticity. So, if you're hearing or learning that, you should do A, but what you really want to do is B, fucking do B, because they ain't going to work for you anyways.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think whether you're into, a spiritual entrepreneurship, or just any other entrepreneurship. My belief is that we're all co-creating no matter what. And, to be authentic or to really co-create, you have to be open. And the only way to really be open is to be authentic, right? If you're, like you mentioned before, when you're combining all of these different modalities, if you're closing things off, shutting things down, you're not open. So how can you be this, full flowing channel of what needs to come, whether it's energy or knowledge or teachings or whatever it is? You have to be open, right? And I know that's one thing that I've tried to, when I'm in kind of a train the trainer kind of role, whatever I'm doing, it's, hey, here's everything I know, here's everything I've learned. You take what resonates and make it your own. And that's how you apply it, or how I recommend applying it, right? It doesn't have to be this, or this, and then this. Make it authentic.
Yeah.
And your authenticity can also change, right? Maybe, what I was doing 3 years ago was my authentic approach. That's changed because I have become even more authentic. Right? And I think that's the key for any entrepreneur, is to, move into that authentic self so that you are open. And then that other big piece is, acceptance in 2 ways: acceptance of self, that, if you're being your authentic self, then that is perfect. Exactly where you need to be. And also accepting that some people are going to love that and some people are going to hate it. And that's okay. Those that hate it, my belief is they're not in their authentic self, or they would be accepting.
Totally. And it's also the piece around, like, I mean, because we don't want to beat ourselves up about this. This is fascinating because like when you go and so if I take my Reiki teacher, for example, who she was very traditional, old school, which is one of the reasons I chose her, because I didn't want anything diluted. Like the Reiki training that I took was just Reiki, like I think you say it Usui, right? I always trip over that word. But like I didn't want, Blue Angel this or Holy Fire. Like I just wanted Reiki at the time. That's what I wanted, right? And so she had the keys and the codes for me that I needed at that time. At that time, our vibrations, our frequencies were in resonance, right? And so because we were in resonance, I was able to receive from her, right? I was able to pull forward what it was that I needed. It wasn't necessarily everything, but it was what I needed so that I could go on to the next step. And now, like years later, you know what? I don't even think I've talked to her for quite a while because we're no longer resonant anymore. Like she's grown and she's changed in how she does things and what she offers. And I also have grown and changed and, and so we're just not the vibrational match anymore. Right. But if we don't open ourselves up to what we are a vibrational match to, then we can't grab on to those pieces or those keys and codes so that we can move forward. And it's so funny, like, because when you're open, that's when shit starts to just kind of come forward. Right. And even though this person might not be a forever person or your forever teacher or guru, whatever you want to say, like you're there in that space and time for a reason until you're ready to move forward. Right. Like even as you're talking, I'm sitting here and I'm like, I need to do a course for healers and unplug them from all that fucking shit. Like go take your modalities from everybody else. And once you got like at least 4, then come see me and I'll teach you how to just like unplug from all that so you can do your own thing. Right?
Yeah. So let's share a little bit about that without going into a full course, but what were some of the things that you did to overcome those symptoms, we'll say, of imposter syndrome?
To overcome imposter syndrome. Well, I think for me, a lot of it actually came from the work that I do as a practitioner. Like I did lots of clearing statements and I did subconscious imprinting. And I went into my Akashic records and I really had to become like awareness would be key, right? Because we can't move or shift or release anything that we're not aware of. So I, like in essence, with or without those tools, I had to be willing to get really fucking honest with myself. Right? Because I knew, and I think most people know this on some level when it's happening, I knew that what was holding myself back was me. Right? Sometimes that's a hard pill to swallow, right? It would be a lot easier for me to be like, okay, Kim, I'm going to come see you for a session. And if you could fix this for me, that'd be awesome. It's like, not really how it works. I can give you tools. You can give me tools, right? We can guide each other through stuff, but ultimately it still has to be me. So the awareness would be the first piece. And the second piece, and this is where the fear will start to drop in for a lot of people. But for me, it was through action. Like it was that old adage of like, feel the fear. There we go. And do it anyways. Yeah. Because it was through the doing of it, even though sometimes it was fucking terrifying to push the live button or whatever it was, but it was through the doing that then it dismantled the charge to it. Because you would do it and then you'd be like, oh, that wasn't so bad. Right. Or you get feedback from other people and you're like, oh, well, that was, people are saying it's way better than I thought it was. Or, we never give ourselves enough credit. Yeah. Right. And so we step through it. We feel the fear. We do it anyways. And through that, we start to, dispel that energy. We start to slowly let go. We get more comfortable because we become more comfortable being uncomfortable. And in some way, shape, or form, we also recognize that it's not nearly as bad as the story we made it out to be, because chances are, even though we think everybody's watching, fucking nobody is watching in some ways.
Yes. Yeah. Right? They're watching like 3 days later, maybe.
Yeah.
Getting comfortable with the uncomfortable, that has been such a strong statement for me, myself, and then with others that I, work with too, is so important. The other thing, that I realized along the way is, there are so many great teachers and leaders out there, right? And so we can say, Deepak Chopra and Joe Dispenza and Gabby Bernstein, as Esther Hicks, all these different, Louise Hay, like take them all. They're all teaching the same thing, right? Bottom line, they're all teaching, let go of the past, be present, raise your vibration. It's just being taught in a different approach through different stories, their own personal stories they're sharing. So, how is it any different for me to teach that? How is it any different for you to teach that? It's not, right? They're just more well-known. That's it. They're just more well-known.
Yeah. And so because you and I talked about this before we hopped on, this idea, and I was totally guilty of this, and so this might resonate with some of our listeners, is you go and you take something from somebody and you get trained in it. And then you're like, okay, now I want to put it out into the world. So I just took yoga, or I just took meditation, or I just took Reiki, and now I want to put it in the world. And then maybe you look at it and you go, oh, but I can't do that because they do that. Nobody owns meditation or yoga. Like, I mean, there are versions, I guess, where someone has trademarked something, right? But you teach it in your own way, right? We don't copycat it, right? But we bring it out into the world in your own way, because the tones that I have to give to people are different than the tones that you have to give to people, right? And ultimately, the collective goal, if we were to look at it on a soul level, is that we reach all of humanity, regardless of what tones we need to use, right? It's that everybody gets this information in some way, shape, or form, so that all of us can evolve.
Totally. Yeah. And it's just like you said, it's are you on the same vibration or frequency as, the person teaching this course or the person who wrote this book, right? We've all probably had that experience where, I might say, oh, Tracy, you got to read this book. It's so great. And then you read it and you're like, oh, wasn't that great, right? Whereas then I can tell somebody else that, and they're like, oh my God, that's the best book ever.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Or vice versa. You get a recommendation, or even reading a book. I think we both had this experience, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but we did a training together where we were required to read The Untethered Soul.
Yep.
And I remember that at the time when we had to read it, I hated that book.
So did I.
Maybe it was because there was this timeline we had to read it in certain. I didn't enjoy it. I remember reading it thinking, this is the stupidest book. I hate this book. Mm-hmm. And about maybe 6 months, 8 months later, I read that book again, and it was the greatest book ever.
Yeah.
Right. But I wasn't in a place of openness, or I wasn't in a place of being ready to receive, or in the right frequency. Right.
Yeah.
I can think of other videos. So for example, there's a video I've played probably a million times in a lot of different trainings and workshops, and it's Dr. Sandra Parker, Love Over Fear, I think. And it's like a 4 or 6 minute video, but she's basically talking about, there's one choice, love or fear. And probably the first 100 times I watched that, I got the message, but not like I have the message now. It took watching it that many times until one day, I don't know, I just took it in a whole deeper way, and maybe even embodied it.
Yeah.
And I think that's been something I've been really aware of lately. Is it's one thing to understand something, but another thing to really embody it.
Totally.
And that's where I think a big shift happens. But yeah, at the end of the day, we're all trying to offer something good. We're trying to offer healing. We're offering light and help and guidance.
Yeah. And, 2 things that I would love to just kind of add to what you've said, Kim. The first thing is, like, being open to receive is like it, what's the word I want? Like, we don't realize how important it actually is. And so, like, I can think of instances where I've been, let's say, taking a course, right? Or it could be even just listening to a masterclass or whatever that looks like, and having moments where I feel like the person that is teaching or guiding or whatever is literally speaking another language. Like, I'm sitting there and I'm like, I don't fucking know what you're saying right now. Right. And it's like, rewind on the replay. I listened to it like 12 times. I'm like, I don't fucking get it. I don't fucking get it. And I used to go into this story of like, well, I must not be spiritual enough, or I must not be gifted enough, or I must not be smart enough to get this, right? And it's none of those things. It's that I wasn't ready to receive what was being said. But then when I go back, let's say 6 months later or a year later, whatever, and I listen to it again and I go, oh, I totally get it now, right? But we have to remember, when anytime we're listening to, you could be listening to me, to Kim, to like whoever it is, and they're speaking to especially a group, there's different things that are landing for different people, right? And it's like pulling, it's like a marionette puppet in a way, right? We're just pulling on different information streams to bring it in, right? And so sometimes we have to really allow ourselves to even just to be open. So if we're that person that's automatically closed off and it automatically like this, or in a state of judgment or a state of I'm always right, or this person's always wrong, we're blocking ourselves off from receiving all of that, right? And the other piece that I want to bring up is, when we talk about like being in resonance or in that same vibration with someone, that doesn't always mean that it's comfortable. So what I mean by that is, I remember taking a course, actually the beginning of COVID. It was one of the first business courses that I ever took. And I watched this person's masterclass, and she's actually a really good friend of mine now, which is hilarious, because I watched this masterclass and I was triggered AF. Like, I was so triggered by this person. I was sitting there, I'm like, I don't fucking like you. I just do not like you. And for whatever reason, I got this message. It was like, yeah, she's triggering you, sign up for her course. And that was the first time I'd ever done that. In the past, I would always sign up for things because I would see the person, I'd be like, oh, I think I really like her. I'd like to be her best friend. Like, right. And that would be the thing that would get me to say yes to it. And this time it was like, I just did not want to even touch this person with a 10-foot pole. And I can share this because she knows this story. So it's not like it's a secret. But so I signed up, and it was one of the best things that I ever did. And like I said, now we actually partner together in business. We're really good friends. We talk almost every day. Like, it's hilarious in a lot of ways, right? But sometimes it's not always the, oh my God, I love this person, so I'm going to say yes. Sometimes it's this person like shakes my shit. And so I know I need to say yes.
Yeah. Yeah. That's where the growth happens, right?
Totally.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
I had something kind of came into my mind and I've totally lost it.
That's why I write shit down. I'm like, yeah.
Oh my goodness. I feel like I was going to share something else about making that shift. Oh, I know what it was. I think, what we're all trying to do, whether intentionally or consciously or unconsciously, probably more unintentionally but it's rewiring ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're hardwired the way we are just because of how we've been brought up, what we've been exposed to, what we've been through. And, some of that hardwiring is good, and we need to keep some of that hardwiring, and some of it needs to be rewired. Whether it's beliefs, patterns, behaviors, that sort of thing. And my experience is kind of coming back to that difference of knowing something and embodying it. I think when you embody it, that's when that rewiring happens. Mm-hmm. And my experience is when I've made a huge, like complete rewiring shift like that, it's almost like you can't undo it. Yeah. It's like you can't go back and have that same belief, or you can't go back and approach the situation you used to. No matter how hard you try, you just can't. And that's a good thing. It's a good thing. And an example maybe I'll use is, I used to really struggle with a lot of anxiety and depression, and like the physical symptoms and that sort of thing. And it's been so long since I've had it, I can't remember what it feels like. I can't even try to recreate it. And it's not like things don't happen. Shit still happens in my life. There's still events that are sad, that are traumatic, but I do not respond the way I used to, because that hardwiring has changed, right? Yeah. I think there was something when we were waiting for our granddaughter to be born. It was like a 3-day thing. And my husband was so anxious. And then I kind of, I think energetically was picking up, and I was starting to feel that anxiety. And that was the first time I could remember what it felt like.
Mhm.
But aside from that, I couldn't remember. And I just share that as an example because there's so many ways that that can be applied, right? Where you get to a point, you know, if you kind of do that work, you get to a point where you can't remember what it feels like to have imposter syndrome, or you can't even recreate that within you because there's just been that hardwire shift. Does that
Mhm.
make sense? Have you had any experiences like that?
Yeah, like I feel like when I get to the place where I'm embodying something, it feels very second nature. So it's almost like you go from this place of, okay, right now I'm trying to learn how to embody this. So it feels like work in a way, and it feels like I have to practice, and it feels like it's kind of top of mind, and I'm, putting a lot of energy and effort to it. And when that shift finally happens, it's number one, it's almost like I don't even notice. Right. It's like we move into student to mastery kind of in a way, right? So all of a sudden I don't really notice, and I just do it, and it feels second nature, and it's easy, and all of that practice and effort and energy just kind of like falls away, right? And then I almost kind of forget. And then all of a sudden something will pop up to remind me, or someone will say something to me like, oh wow, you really blah, blah, and I'm like, huh, yeah, I guess you're right, right? It's like we don't give ourselves enough credit when we get to the other side of it, just because it's just a part of who we are.
Yeah.
And those things that we've worked so hard to embody that other people see as our gifts or our talents or whatever it is, we're just kind of like, oh,
Yeah,
no big deal.
absolutely.
you
Yeah.
know
I think the other thing that comes up for me that I try to take this approach, and I try to encourage others to take this approach too, that, you know, there'll be those times when the universe will test us, right? It's like, okay, you've learned this lesson, you're embodying it. Now let's see if you're actually going to follow through with it, right? And so something comes up, and one of two things happens, right? We can go back to that old mindset, that old response and behavior, or we can go, okay, here's my test,
yes.
grateful for this, right? And move through it in the new way.
Yeah.
And I feel like when you do that, that solidifies. That's like the final little like tightening of the wire, or whatever you want to think of it that way, right? That's when that final switch is made. You pass the test.
I totally agree. And you know what, I've had this conversation many, many times in my containers, because I'll say to my clients and into my containers, like, okay, now we've done all of this energetic work, right? And we've worked through these beliefs or this energy or these Akashic records, whatever it is, right? And now it's about action, right? There's a follow through that's required to make a different choice, or to speak differently, or to choose differently, or to say, or to, whatever, behave differently. That's going to kind of like cement this in. So what happens is, if we don't do that and we go back to the old behavior, it's kind of like quitting smoking, right? I use this analogy a lot where, let's say you're a smoker, and my mom, actually, she was a smoker, and the way she quit was actually through hypnosis. And so she went and she had the sessions. And so, a lot of hypnosis is kind of the rewiring action here, right? But she still had the physical habit of wanting to, like, pick it up with her hands, do the thing. And so if she would have, left her hypnosis appointment and lit up a cigarette, she basically just undid everything that was done up here. Right. So that's often what happens in energy work too, is we can go through, we can do all the energetic and the spiritual stuff. But then if we take the same thought again, or we take the same physical action, we've looped ourselves back. And it's one of the biggest things people will complain about. Well, I can't get rid of this. I keep going back to this. I keep going. Yeah, because you're not doing, the human doing has to be different.
Yeah.
Right.
And, I'm going to say this, and a lot of teachers, yoga practitioners will probably not like to hear this, but I'm a big believer. Reiki is a wonderful thing. A lot of energy healing is a wonderful thing, but it often, not always, but often it's just a temporary fix, right? It moves that energy, but until you deal with what is creating that energy, it's not going away.
Totally.
It's not going away. So I don't want to discourage people from doing Reiki or energy healing. I mean, I offer that service as well. It can be helpful and a big part of getting to that root. But if you don't go deeper than that,
yeah,
just, it's similar to massage, I guess, in a sense, right? Like you go for massage, you feel good. Things happen, life goes on, you get that tension again.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Go back.
To me, Reiki is, and again, I do Reiki as well. And to me, Reiki is a gateway to everything else, kind of. But, I don't do a ton of Reiki for that exact reason, right? To me, like for me personally, if I'm going to go do or receive, sorry, a Reiki session, it's likely because I want to have a deeply, let's say, relaxing and restful, experience in kind of like those lower brainwave states. I don't generally go and get Reiki done for, I'm going to say healing per
Big
se,
healing.
but like if I have a problem, that's definitely not my go-to in any way, shape, or form. Because
And that's why I think the combining of modalities is more powerful, right? Because a lot of times, until energy is shifted, deeper things can't happen.
totally.
So sometimes a person needs to do that first. Shift that energy so you are more open, then you can be in that flow of giving and receiving, more able to release, less resistance, that sort of thing.
That's why I offer intuitive massage sessions. So I do body work, and I mean, all my massages are infused with Reiki because it relaxes the physical body, because we drop into the parasympathetic nervous system. And when we feel relaxed and when we feel safe, then we can open up to looking at what we actually need to see. So I start with the physical body first and we drop in. And then when the body tells me that it's ready, then I start to dig or dive, whatever you want to say, right? And look at, I might be asking questions. I might be working with cores and contracts. I may, whatever that is, right? But I need the body to soften first. And I do that with massage and Reiki.
Yeah.
Right? It's the gateway. It's the portal in.
All comes back to being open, right?
Yeah, totally.
So true.
Yeah. I feel like I had something else to say too, but I can't remember.
Monday mornings, they're hard.
There's just so much to say about so much,
Well, there is. I mean, we could go down so many different paths with this.
And we kind of went on a tangent because we started with entrepreneurship and now we're talking about modalities, but that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, really, I think the bottom line, I think what we're trying to say here, if we were to summarize it, like being your authentic self is the key, right? In any entrepreneurship. And again, that doesn't mean that you're going to attract every client or that every person out there is going to agree with you or like you or support you, but that's okay.
Yeah,
that's okay. You can't provide services to the world. Nobody can. I don't care who you are. If you're the biggest well-known coach, spiritual teacher, there is no way that you can provide your service to every single person on this planet. There is more than enough clientele for all of us to do this work.
And it's recognizing too, we're also not meant to. Bill Gates isn't meant to serve the world. Deepak Chopra, I don't know why he's in my field today. Deepak Chopra isn't meant to serve the world, whatever it is, right?
He wants you to go meditate.
It could be. Yeah, totally. I don't know what it is, but yeah, absolutely. And so, okay, let me ask you this. If you were to give, let's call it advice, okay, to someone who is a beginning entrepreneur thinking about starting a business, or maybe just has started a business, but kind of in the beginning stages, in addition to being authentic, what else would you tell them?
What I would say is never stop learning. So, books, workshops, podcasts, webinars, whatever, continue to open yourself up. But then, and I guess this kind of leads into the authentic piece, but take the bits and pieces from everything that resonates with you and make it your own. Yeah. And don't let anybody stop you or deter you from going in the direction that feels right. And going in the direction that feels right doesn't mean that we're not going to fail or fall or make a mistake. We need to do that. If we don't, we're never going to grow. We're never going to grow. And like you said before, when we allow ourselves to do that, we find that comfort in the uncomfortable. We get more confident and we just grow from there.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. Beautiful.
And for every one person who has something negative to say, there's 20 others that are happy to support you. Focus on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say if I were giving advice, like the first one would be find your voice, right? And that comes back to that piece of authenticity. It doesn't mean that you can't be talking about the same things other people are talking. It doesn't mean you can't talk about Reiki. You can't talk, that's everywhere, right? None of that is off the table, but it's how are you going to talk about it? Find your own tones and your own voice and your own message so that it will draw your people that are courted and contracted to you, right? And I think the other piece of advice I would give, and we didn't necessarily really go over this today, but entrepreneurship is a fucking long game. It ain't mini golf. And I know that with the way our society works, and like I'm looking at my window here and there because I ordered a book late last night and it's supposed to be here this morning, right? It's like the instant gratification of everything that we have because of all of this beautiful technological advancement that we've made and all of the things. And so we have a tendency, and it could be in your own spiritual journey, right? Or it could be in your business, whatever, or just your life, whatever that looks like. But we really struggle with patience and we want it now. And if I can't have it now, then what I would actually love is to have it yesterday, right? And I am so guilty of this. I am so guilty of this. And so often what will, in my opinion, and from my experience with my clients, what will stop people before they even start is that they don't have the instant win or the instant success that they really want, right? And they'll say, well, I put it out there and nobody responded. Okay, how many times did you put it out there? Once? Okay, so algorithm for starters on Facebook or so, right? Like there's that piece of self-importance again, right? Where we think, I only have to put it out there once, but nobody signed up for it, right? Or I sent one email, but nobody responded, right? And we're not looking at the bigger picture, right? Is that we put it on ourselves, is that, I put it out there and nobody saw it, when actually, you put it out there to however many followers you have, and then the algorithm kicks in and, only, let's say maybe 1% of your followers even saw it. Right. And we get so caught up in ourselves and like, I feel like a broken record and I've already said this and that we end up just kind of shutting everything down before we've even got off the ground, if that makes sense.
Totally.
And so it's the understanding that, yes, entrepreneurship is not easy. Like we said, it's going to bring up all your shit. And at the same time, what I also will tell you is the fucking best thing I ever did. So if you misunderstood me in this entire conversation, please don't. Like, it's the best decision I've ever made. And I wouldn't trade it for the world, even when it's hard. Even when I say that I'm going to quit my day job and go work at Starbucks, which I've said many times before, I'll probably say again, right? In the grand scheme of things, it's the most creativity I've ever experienced, the most freedom. Like there's so much to it. But it's that aspect of giving yourself the grace of time. Yeah. Right. It's not going to happen overnight. Not to say that it's never happened for everyone overnight, because it has, but for the majority, it doesn't. And it's going to take time to find your footing. It's going to take time to find your voice. It's going to take time to find your vibe and your groove and your people. Yeah. Right. Because not only do you need to be ready to step forward out into the world, but the world also needs to be ready for you. So it's going to work both ways.
Absolutely. I think there's also an importance in balance in there. You have to take action. You can't just, like you said, make one post. At the same time, I'm going to share a message that comes through for me so often too, is to not get too controlling about it too. Yep. Like if we get too controlling and we aren't having fun, we're kind of blocking the flow, right? And that's a roller coaster I've been on for a few years, where when I'm trying too hard, nothing happens. But when I just get intentional, do some work, and then shift and just enjoy, everything comes in. Yeah. And you kind of reminded me too, when you talked about finding your voice. I think this was from when we did our meditation teacher training together. We watched a video. I forget what it's called, but I think it was Kelly McGonigal.
Yeah.
And where she actually comes on and she says, I've been teaching this for however many years, and I was wrong. And she admits what she was saying, right? She's changed her mind. And I thought, that is just such a powerful lesson in itself, right? Because we are going to change our beliefs. Mm-hmm. And so, share what you believe now. And if that belief changes, don't have shame, don't hide. hey, you know what? I've changed my view on this. I've changed my opinion or my belief on this.
Yeah.
And here's my new belief, right? That was such a powerful teaching just in itself. I can't even remember what she was talking about, probably something about meditation or,
I think it was
um,
stress. I think it was something about, it was a
yeah, that's
talk.
right. It was about stress.
Yeah.
And she was teaching this about stress. And then she came back and said, you know what? No, I had it all wrong.
Mhm.
And I thought, wow, that, that was powerful because we are all human.
Yeah.
And, some might say it was a mistake. Some would say, no, it's just, she furthered her learning. She
And it was
furthered
powerful
her.
because it was authentic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, you just reminded me of that. I'd forgotten about that,
Yeah.
that video. So yeah, find your voice. And you know what? If what you say you don't resonate with 3 years down the road, that's okay.
Mhm.
Then just keep speaking.
Yeah. Yeah. Because eventually you will find those tones, right? But sometimes, just like in our healing work, like I often refer to our healing work like an onion, right? It's like you start on the outside and we just peel. You can't get to the center just like that, right? Like you got to peel layer by layer, and our body's got to adjust, and we got to move through this stuff. And so it's, it's definitely an evolution, right? And finding your voice is kind of the same thing, right? It's, you're going to start, and most people will start and they're going to be very generic and very general because they're a little trepidatious, right? They're not sure, right? But the more that you do it, you'll start to peel back those layers. And the people that you look at now in social media that you think like, wow, they're so polarizing, like, look how strong they are and what they share and whatever, you'll get there too, right? You're peeling back. You're just peeling back. And when you finally find that voice, it literally will send ripples out into the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love it.
Beautiful.
We could go on all day, I'm sure.
I know, right? Like there's so much to say in this. So for
There
sure,
is.
please not only like and subscribe here on YouTube, but go to our Facebook page, and you'll find the replay link right there. And please continue the conversation, because we would love to hear your spiritual views on all of this, as well as your experiences for those of you that have had some or are entering into entrepreneurship. Or if you have any questions for us, we're happy to answer those as well. So please feel free to tag us in your comments and let us know where you're at, and we will continue the conversation over there. Okay, perfect. Any last words, Kim?
No, just have a great day, everyone.
Yeah, awesome. And we will see you next week on Monday on The Spiritual View. Take care. Bye.
Bye, everyone.